Mandalore once tamed dragons and beat the Jedi at their own game, then spent 10,000 years burning itself down from the inside. The galaxy's greatest warriors never lost their edge. They lost each other, turning every generation after their golden age into a fight over who deserved to lead. A lone foundling with no claim to that legacy will end up holding what's left of it. The ancient era. 10,000 years ago, a single culture figured out how to ride dragons into war. Not metaphorical dragons, actual, city-flattening, gigantic reptilian monsters called mythosaurs, and the people who tamed them turned that act into the foundation of an entire identity. That's the starting point. Not a flag, not a border, not a government. A monster, broken and bent to serve a warrior culture that existed before the Galactic Republic had even hit its stride. This isn't a footnote species with a cool helmet. This is a civilization that looked at the most terrifying animal on the planet and decided the correct response was domestication. Most cultures see a monster that size and build a religion around avoiding it. This one built a saddle. Once they settled the world of Mandalore itself, the mythosaur became more than a war beast. It became the symbol stitched into everything that culture would ever be, resurfacing thousands of years later as something closer to prophecy than history. Under a ruler remembered simply as Mandalore the Great, this warrior culture didn't just defend that symbol, they exported it, conquering world after world until fear of the name did half the fighting for them. Historians reconstruct an old Mandalorian empire sprawling across dozens of systems between roughly 5000 and 3960 BBY, built entirely on the reputation of soldiers nobody wanted to fight twice. That expansion came at a cost nobody saw coming. Conquest on that scale eventually dragged Mandalorians into a prolonged war with the Jedi Order, a conflict so bloody it hard-coded a mutual hatred that outlived every single person who fought in it. Exact battles from this stretch are thin on detail, but the outcome isn't. An entire galaxy learned to fear one word: Mandalorian. Picture that for a second. A people who outfought Jedi, a people who made monsters kneel. Somewhere in that empire was a kid who just wanted to belong to something that strong, something that permanent, something that felt like it would never crack. He had no idea the whole thing was already standing on a fault line, because raw conquest wasn't what would define them for the next 1,000 years. That would come from a single object, forged by the one man who did the unthinkable and crossed to the enemy. The Old Republic era. The most sacred object in Mandalorian history was forged by the one enemy they were never supposed to trust. Around 1019 BBY, a Mandalorian named Tere Vizsla did something no Mandalorian had ever done before. He joined the Jedi Order, not fought them, not raided them, joined them. And while he was there, wearing their robes and living by their code, he built a lightsaber unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Blackblade, zero precedent. The Darksaber. That alone should have been a footnote, a weird historical crossover, filed away and forgotten. Instead, it became the single most dangerous object House Vizsla ever got its hands on. When Tere Vizsla died, the Jedi did what Jedi do. They took the blade and locked it in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, treating it like a museum piece instead of what it actually was. It sat there for centuries. Then, during the fall of the Old Republic, House Vizsla came and took it back. Not borrowed, stolen by the family whose ancestor built it in the first place. And this is where the real damage starts. The Darksaber didn't just come home, it became the deed to Mandalore itself. Whoever held the blade could claim leadership of every clan, every tribe, every warrior on the planet. Not through votes, not through bloodline, through possession. Think about what that actually means. An entire warrior culture, the same one that once put dragons on a leash, decided its highest office would be decided by whoever could physically take a sword away from someone else and keep it. House Vizsla used that new rule to shove traditionalist power straight back to the top, elbowing out anyone who leaned Republic-friendly or Jedi-aligned. The blade didn't unify Mandalore. It gave every ambitious warrior a permanent, sanctioned reason to try. That's the cruel joke sitting underneath 10,000 years of Mandalorian history. Their crown wasn't inherited. It was mugged. Every future foundling raised to believe in honor, in clan, in something worth belonging to, was actually growing up under a system built on one simple rule. Take it if you can hold it. A rule that says the strongest should rule works right up until someone decides the strongest thing to do is stop fighting entirely. And when that idea took hold on a warrior world, it didn't bring peace. It brought a war between Mandalorians and their own reflection. The Mandalorian Civil Wars. A duchess took the most feared warrior culture in the galaxy and told them to put the guns down. Permanently. That is not a policy. That is a declaration of war against your own people's entire identity. Satin Kryze inherited a homeworld that had spent generations conquering, raiding, and burning its way across the outer systems, and she looked at all of it and decided the warrior legacy was the disease, not the cure. Between roughly 60 and 42 BBY, that decision tore Mandalore in half. The new Mandalorians, her movement, wanted full demilitarization. No armor culture, no clan warfare, no more sending kids off to die for a reputation nobody profits from anymore. On paper, it is a beautiful idea. A woman looks at 10,000 years of bloodshed and says enough, and she nearly gets away with it. But you cannot ask a warrior people to become pacifists overnight without creating a backlash. And House Vizsla was that backlash made flesh. They formed Death Watch. a militant faction that saw Satine's reforms as a betrayal of everything Mandalore stood for. When they lost the political fight, they did not lay down their weapons. They got exiled to Concordia, Mandalore's own moon, and sat there, armed, furious, and patient. So picture the setup, a peaceful, disarmed homeworld, glowing with Satine's vision of a better future, sitting directly under a moon full of exiled extremists who never accepted defeat. That is not resolution. That is a ceasefire with a countdown timer. Some fans will tell you Satine saved Mandalore, that she broke a cycle of violence that would have eventually gotten the whole planet wiped out anyway. Others point out that stripping a warrior culture of its army right before the galaxy's biggest war in 1,000 years is not visionary. It's a catastrophic bet. Both sides have a case. Nothing in canon settles it outright, but the timing is brutal enough to make the argument for itself. What nobody disputes is the result. A homeworld that looked peaceful from orbit and was actually hollowed out, split down the middle between people who wanted to bury the sword and people who never stopped sharpening it. Somewhere in that split is a kid who hasn't been born yet, who's going to inherit whatever's left of this argument whether he wants it or not. Exile is never the end of an extremist. It's a waiting room, and when the whole galaxy caught fire, the ones plotting from that moon saw their chance to take the homeworld back. Sword first. The Clone Wars era. A queen loses her throne to a man wielding her own culture's sacred sword, and he's not even an outsider. He's descended from the same house that forged it. That's the part that makes the Clone Wars era so brutal for Mandalore. This isn't invasion, this is family, turning on family. Satine Kryze spent years building something almost nobody else in Mandalorian history managed: peace. No wars, no weapons culture, a planet that finally stopped bleeding. The new Mandalorians called it progress. Death Watch called it surrender. And when the Clone Wars broke out across the galaxy between 22 and 19 BBY, that disagreement stopped being philosophical and started being fatal. Pre-Vizsla ran Death Watch, and Pre-Vizsla carried the Darksaber, the same black-bladed relic forged 1,000 years earlier by Tare Vizsla, the first Mandalorian ever inducted into the Jedi Order. That sword was never just a weapon, it was a claim. Whoever held it got to say they'd earned the right to rule, the same brutal logic that's been quietly running this whole story since the beginning. Vizsla didn't just disagree with his Duchess, he allied with crime syndicates, recruited outside muscle, and marched Death Watch straight at Sundari to rip Mandalore out of her hands by force. Picture that for a second. The planet's own former political system built on conquest, literally weaponized against the one government that tried to end the cycle. Satine wanted a homeworld her people could actually live in instead of die for. That's not nothing. That's the entire tragedy sitting inside one sentence. And she lost it, watching the culture she tried to save get dragged back into the exact violence she'd spent her whole reign trying to bury. By the time the dust settled, Mandalore wasn't united under anyone. Coups, outside interventions, a galactic war chewing through everything around it, and a planet left politically shattered with nobody left who could credibly claim the whole thing. Some fans will tell you Vizsla represented the real Mandalorian spirit, warriors who refused to go soft. Others say Satine was the only leader brave enough to imagine something better. They're both right, and that's exactly the problem. A culture that can produce two visions this opposed and only settle it with a blade was never going to survive intact. What was left after Vizsla and Satine tore each other apart wasn't a nation anymore. It was fragments, clans, and grudges. A people this fractured, this exhausted from fighting each other, makes a perfect target, and someone far larger and colder than any rival clan was about to notice how little was left to defend. The Imperial era Mandalore did not fall to the galaxy's best warriors. It fell after them. The Empire arrives in 19 BBY, the exact moment the Clone Wars ends and the Republic quietly becomes Palpatine's personal property. No battle for that transition. No resistance. The galaxy just changes owners overnight, and everyone is too exhausted to notice. Mandalore, a world that had already burned through civil war after civil war fighting over one sword and one throne, was in no shape to notice either. It barely had the strength left to notice its own name. That exhaustion is the whole story. Every fractured alliance from every earlier age of Mandalorian history left the planet with fewer warriors, fewer walls, and fewer reasons to stand together when it actually mattered. So when the moment came, it was not some rival clan finishing the job. It was a single Imperial officer named Moff Gideon, executing what modern accounts tie to Operation Cinder, a contingency plan built to punish worlds the Empire no longer wanted to control. Somewhere between 4 and 9 ABY, after the rebellion had already blown up 2 Death Stars and technically won the war, Gideon oversaw the Great Purge. Mandalore, the planet, gets gutted. Not in some grand cinematic siege we get to watch. The show does not show it to us step by step. No wide shot, no countdown, no last stand. It gets described after the fact in fragments by survivors who lived through it, which is somehow worse. You are not given a battle, you are given the aftermath, and you are left to fill in the smoke yourself. Here is the part that should sting. The Empire, at this point, is already losing. Endor happens in 4 ABY. The Death Star is gone, the Emperor is dead, the New Republic is rising, and Gideon still has enough men, enough ships, and enough time to raise an entire warrior culture almost as an afterthought. Nothing in canon confirms the Empire wanted Mandalore specifically for its benefits Beskar and its soldiers rather than simple scorched earth cruelty. But follow the pattern. This is a regime that spent the whole war hunting rare resources and elite fighters for its own arsenals, and Mandalore happened to be sitting on both at once. A people who once rode into battle on the backs of mythosaurs end up hiding underground, stripped of their planet, split into covert cells across a galaxy that barely remembers they exist. 10,000 years of civil war, and this is the invoice. Nobody sends a receipt, the bill just arrives, and the culture pays it in silence. But a scattered people isn't a dead one, and in the ruins of a broken galaxy, one masked foundling with no birthright was about to stumble into the one thing that could either finish Mandalore off for good or finally break its oldest curse. The New Republic Era. The New Republic wins the war and immediately starts losing the peace, and that gap is exactly where one foundling ends up rewriting 10,000 years of history. 4 years after Endor, the galaxy is technically free. Practically, it's a mess. Imperial remnants are still armed, still organized, still hiding in the corners of star systems the new government doesn't have the ships to patrol. Moff Gideon runs one of those remnants like his own private kingdom, and nobody in the New Republic is coming to stop him. That job falls to a bounty hunter instead. Din Djarin was born around 29 or 28 years before Endor, raised as a foundling after his parents died in an Imperial bombing raid, and by the time Season 1 opens, he's just another guy in Beskar armor, taking jobs in the Outer Rim. Favreau and Filoni have placed that story 5 years after Endor, which lands at around 9 ABY. Grogu's training with Luke adds roughly 2 more years, pushing Season 3 and the Book of Boba Fett to around 11 ABY. That's not a loose estimate, that's confirmed by the people who made the show. Do the math on that gap and something clicks. This entire saga, Bounty Hunter to Clan Reunifier to Mandalore's Rebuilder, happens in a window of about 2 years. 2 years to go from lone gunslinger to the man holding the Darksaber. 2 years to go from I've spoken to actually meaning it, and it happens roughly 25 years before the First Order crawls out of the wreckage the New Republic left behind. The New Republic isn't fighting a two-front war against remnants and its own bureaucracy so much as it's sleepwalking into one, and every year it looks the other way is a year Imperial warlords get to regroup somewhere the new government can't be bothered to check. Mandalore's ruin was never just a Mandalorian problem. It's happening inside a galaxy that already forgot how fast an empire can grow back from ash, which is where the sword finally finds the one person it was never built for. Every ruler before Din took the Darksaber to prove something, to conquer something, to sit on something. Din takes it because he loses a fight he didn't want, and he spends the next 2 years trying to give it away, hand it off, retire it, anything but keep it. He's a foundling with no birthright, no bloodline, no interest in a crown, guarding a homeworld that's already ash, and a symbol that already burned everyone who touched it. That's the whole cure. The blade that taught Mandalore leadership was something you take by force, finally lands on someone who refuses to take anything by force. Mythosaur doesn't rise for a conqueror this time. It rises for a man who just wants to bring a kid home and call a broken people whole again. Din Djarin never wanted to rule anyone, and that's exactly why he's the first Mandalorian in 10,000 years who could actually save Mandalore. The sword that taught his people to conquer each other finally landed in the hands of someone who didn't want it, and only then did it stop being a crown and start being a promise. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.